What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In. I'm your host, Mason Cameron at PFF_Mace on Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta at Vishaal_Gupta95 on Twitter. It's been the holiday weekend. We've already got a bunch of games in the books that we're going to break down. How are you doing? How was your holiday? How are you living?
It was a very nice stress-free holiday for me. Just did nothing but watch football all day. Not necessarily the best games, but football is football. I'll take it. And yeah, it was a great day. How about yours?
Yeah, we were talking about this when we were right before we went live too, but I had to work the middle game of the slate yesterday. So I didn't have too many functions that I went to, but I did get to eat a couple of nice little plates, some leftovers and whatnot. And I guess I got to watch Deron Bland, make history. So that was interesting, as much as that wasn't the most interesting game in general. But yeah, we keep it living, we keep it pushing. So we have a bunch of stuff to break down tonight, V. So we're going to break down pretty much all of the games that have already happened, and kind of give our thoughts on where those teams are headed and what we saw. There's some surprising, tidbits in there. There's some unsurprising tidbits and a lot, that we've learned from the games that have happened so far. 4 of them that we're going to be breaking down. And then we're going to be getting into our picks for the week. Just like usual, we just have a little bit more of a TNF recap than usual. So we're going to break right into it with the first game of the Turkey Day slate there. Green Bay heads into Detroit and takes down the Lions. And this was a surprising one. The Lions were over a touchdown favorite. They were 8.5 at close. The game total for this one at 47. Green Bay wins 29-22, covering the plus 8.5. Not only covering the plus 8.5, but a straight up win on the money line at plus 335 roughly. That's huge. 3-1 odds to take there. This game went over the 47 with 51 total points. The Green Bay defense, showed up. They looked better than they had in a while. This was kind of a surprising mark for them in some spots. They let some things get away from them, but this game by and large did not look like the Detroit Lions team that we've seen, at their peak. This looked like very much their valley, like about their lowest point that we've seen them in the season. They've kind of started to sputter as of recently. They failed to cover their last two. This one at Green Bay, the other one at Chicago. That's not a good look for them, especially as they're one of the strongest teams in the NFC right now. They're 8-3, and it's just not looking great for them, at least in terms of their floor. What do you make of what we learned out of this game? Are you at all worried about what's going on with the Lions, or is this kind of just a positive move forward for the Packers, who have had their own troubles this season?
I think there definitely has to be some concerns for Detroit heading into the playoffs. I mean, if we're just talking about, what they'll do the rest of the regular season, yeah, there's probably not too much to worry about. They should still relatively easily win this division. Shouldn't be much of an issue there. They'll host a playoff game in the wild card round. The question is what happens once they get there, because if you want to make a run, you're going to have to get through, Dallas, Philly, San Francisco. And if you're playing defense the way Detroit is playing defense right now, you're not winning those games. They've given up at least 26 points in 4 straight games. That includes Baltimore, the Chargers, the Bears, and the Packers. You're not going to win if you can't stop these elite offenses in San Fran, Philly, and Dallas. And then you're definitely not going to win if you're turning the ball over at the rate that they have in the last 2 weeks. 6 turnovers in the last 2 weeks, 5 by Jared Goff. That's just not going to get it done. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of concern, I would say, for Detroit heading into the playoffs, because you're going to need a perfect game from Goff if you want to be competing in those games. And it might happen. He's had some perfect games the last couple of years, but you can't bank on that, especially if you're going on the road in Philly or in San Fran, which, looking at the record, is likely going to happen. So definitely a lot of a concern based on, some expectations they had this year. But don't take any credit away from Green Bay. They looked very good this week. They looked very good last week. Only a game out of the 7 seed right now, and they have a very favorable schedule coming up. I think they play Carolina, the Bucks, the Giants, the Bears, the Vikings without Kirk Cousins. They have a very, very easy schedule to finish up the season. So don't be shocked at all if they find themselves in the 7 or maybe even the 6 seed, given how Seattle is playing right now and the schedule they have. So if you want to maybe find a nice future on them to make the playoffs, if you can get that at plus money, that might not be a terrible bet.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And it almost seems like Jared Goff kind of came under the PFF, top graded quarterback curse, because it seems like as soon as the little piece came out that he had overtaken as the top graded passer of the season so far, he just fell in shambles. And a
Yeah.
guy that, was very famously on a streak for not having thrown an interception in X number of attempts, all of a sudden can't hold on to the football, is giving it
Yep.
away all the time. And that's a huge bad look for them. That's a look that is the Jared Goff of, years ago, and not necessarily the Jared Goff that we've seen recently. And then on the side of Green Bay, man, they're actually playing decently offensively. They're yeah, that sounded weird. They're playing decently offensively, and their defense is playing well too. And one of the big reasons, obviously, in my opinion, has been how they've been able to find Jaden Reed. He's been big for them, a couple of scores in the last few games. So they've really been able to distribute the ball well, even without like super high end talent. And that's good to see for them. Now, they have an uphill battle in terms of getting out of their own way, which has kind of been their issue a lot this year. But what they've looked like so far, or at least recently, has definitely looked like some positive regression towards the average, towards what we would hope to see from them. And if we're talking about it, would you rather be the team that's peaking right now heading into the back half of the season and pushing for that playoff berth and having that momentum to go into it? Or would you rather be this Lions team that has to figure it out and pick yourself up by the bootstraps and make good on what you've set yourself up for this season? That's going to be the questions we have moving forward. And it will definitely be the questions surrounding the Lions and Packers lines next week, the week after, and heading into December, into the late stretch of the season, where there could be some significant value on both sides. I guess in fading potentially Lions, especially if they get over touchdown spreads from here on out.
Yep. Very true.
The next game, the one that I had to work, that wasn't super interesting, but was interesting by the end of it, I guess, after some history was made. So Washington heads into Dallas and absolutely gets smothered by them. Washington 10, Dallas 45. Dallas ends up covering the 13-point spread. They move to 8-3 on the season. Now, that's not quite the best against the spread record in terms of win percentage, given that some of those teams have some pushes and whatnot. Philly technically owns the top, given on how you're, marking where the line finishes. But that is the most covers in the NFL at 8. So they led this entire game. It wasn't really in doubt at all. But they did manage 25 fourth quarter points, including the Deron Bland pick 6 to break the record with 5. And that took the game over the 48 total, 55 total points. I mean, what else is there to say right now except for that Dallas is clicking? They are looking like one of the best teams in the league right now, at least against much, much lower skill teams, I would say. They've covered their last 3 all games that were 10+ point favorites. They are 5-1 in games where they're favored by 7 or more points. That's impressive, no
Yep.
matter how you slice it. So I'm interested to see in your take on this. Now, with the Commanders, I know we've kind of been on their side on a few games. They seem to have kind of lost their luster. They give up the ball quite a bit. I mean, we've talked about it. They talk about it on all the broadcasts. They let a lot of pressure up. I mean, we can blame their offensive line there in Washington as much as we want, but sometimes, more than just sometimes, those pressures are credited to Sam Howell for his inability to make some decisions, for kind of some stupid plays with the ball, and for exiting the pocket sometimes when he doesn't need to, feeling phantom pressure. So that's been a huge issue for them. On the other side, the Cowboys offensively, they have been clicking. I mean, Dak is looking as good as he's looked. CD is obviously a lethal weapon. They're getting guys like Cavante Turpin involved. It's just awesome to watch. And Brandon Cooks is coming back. at the perfect time, and he's making huge plays for them. And that's all without even talking about one of the league's leading defenses that turns the ball over at will. They're impressive to watch. And granted, they need to show up against better talented teams. But what are you making of what's happening over there in Dallas right now, V?
It's tough because you're right. They are dominating these lesser teams easily, week in, week out. In three straight, they've won by double digit points. They're putting up 30 plus, even 40 plus points in all of these games. But as soon as they come against a team that has an above 500 record, they just don't seem to be able to take care of business. So far it's only been two examples. It's been the Eagles, it's been the Niners. Those are the two best teams in the conference. So maybe not totally fair, but those are the teams you have to beat if you want to get to where they want to go. So as nice it is, as fun it is as it is to compliment these guys over how dominantly they're playing against some of these lesser teams, at the end of the day, it's not going to matter if they, go out in the divisional round again this year in Philly or in San Fran, and it's just the season's over. Like nobody's going to look back and give them any sort of praise for what they're doing here. So, it's good. They should enjoy it while they can, but obviously for them, all that matters is what they do in the playoffs. So we'll see what happens when we get there. For the Commanders, I mean, well, I don't even know what you can say at this point. They made the move they should have made a long time ago in firing Jack Del Rio this morning. The defense just has been abysmal. They can't do anything well. They haven't rushed the passer well. They haven't covered in the pass game well. They don't stop the run well. They don't really just do anything well at all. Offensively, though, I mean, there's also concerns there because there's just no creativity right now. You're just asking Sam Howell to drop back 40 to 50 times a game, and hopefully he can make something happen. Sometimes he does, but a lot of times he doesn't, and not necessarily on him, but that's just the reality of this game, given some of the talent they have around him. So I would like to see just some more creativity out of Eric Bieniemy on that offense and try to find some other ways to play offense rather than just drop back 40 to 50 times per game. Just straight dropbacks are not working for this team. So they have a lot to figure out for the rest of the season here.
Yeah, it's made them very one-dimensional. Teams are teeing off on them in the pass rush, and they just don't have the players or the signal caller right now to figure that one out. So it's really hurt them. Frankly, they're going to be a target for me on every opportunity that we get for any team that rushes the passer decently well, which I would imagine is going to be a few times as the rest of this season draws on for them. And
Yeah.
as their playoff aspirations kind of get further and further away, and just considering the division they play in, which has two of the best defensive lines in the NFL. And I would say that, I mean, even the Giants are, or I mean, even all of these teams, the Eagles, everybody are going after it. I don't know what they're going to stop. I don't know where they have much to build off of. So it's going to be a tough look for them moving forward. And that just amounts to more value for us, though, as we kind of shop around as the
Yeah,
weeks
for
come.
sure.
The next game on the list, another one that wasn't really all that close, frankly, but we did learn something pretty good from this one. San Francisco looks unfazed. They look like they're back and able to do what they want to do. They win this one on the road 31-13. They cover a 7-point road spread over 43 and a half, 44 total points. So it was just barely there. I would say that San Francisco's back. I think they look like they're a dominating force against. I mean, granted, Seattle might not be the most potent team for that to be a test against, as we've talked about just recently with Dallas just a second ago. But this was an all-out shellacking. Looked like San Francisco did not really feel stressed in much of any way, and they take this one home. So, what did you learn from this one? I know that it's been hard to kind of peg the Seahawks and what they're able to do. They're kind of wishy-washy in terms of offensive production. Their defense, while good at times, just doesn't quite have all of the pieces there that it needs to be that high-end defense that we've kind of known through some years that have kind of held them down. San Francisco, like we talked about, is back. What did you make out of this one, V?
Yeah, I think not only is San Francisco back, I think they have to be the favorites to come out of the NFC right now. I think going even back to last year, what this team has proven is that when they're healthy, they're not going to lose. I mean, the only time they lost last year in the second half of the season was when Brock Purdy got hurt in the NFC Championship game, and obviously when your starter goes down at quarterback, you can't really do a whole lot. This year, the only time they've really struggled is when they've had injuries, whether that was Debo, Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams, whatever it is. As soon as they get everybody back, it's like they haven't missed a step. So I think top to bottom in terms of a roster, they're the best team right now in the NFC, maybe in the whole league, and they obviously have a fantastic coach in Kyle Shanahan. So I think, next week is a huge game for them. They're going into Philadelphia. I'm expecting that regardless of what the line is, I'm probably going to take San Fran. I just think they're the better team, and I would not hesitate to bet on a future right now for San Francisco coming out of the NFC right now. I just think it's not really a question right now who the best team is in that conference. It's San Fran. They're the most complete team. When they're healthy, they play the best football out of anybody. They play well against bad teams. They play well against good teams. It's just consistent every single time they go out there when they're healthy. So yeah, San Fran's all the way back for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about it how they went through that stretch where they weren't covering games, they were having trouble winning games, and all of that was essentially due to injuries. And they're completely back now with how they've looked. They don't really they look like the most complete team. It's something that we were saying about Philly about this time last year that they looked like the most complete team. We've talked about Philly a lot. Philly's still very, very good, but San Francisco has definitely taken those steps forward that we wanted to see from them in previous years in terms of their dominance. They look
Mm-hmm.
like it in every facet of the game right now. They look like they just outclass and outmatch essentially everybody that comes across from them. They're going to be another huge value that we're probably going to ride pretty significantly here leading into the end of the season, where they are going to need to continue to win these games to secure a number one seed in a very top heavy NFC, as we talked about with Dallas, Philly, all these teams that are very poised and very potent. This is going to be a huge stretch for them, and I can't wait to watch it, actually. I think that they're going to make some pretty fun football to watch in the month of December. So,
Absolutely.
and then the last game, the game that just ended a couple of hours ago, another frankly kind of a stinker, but the Dolphins head into New York. They took down the Jets 34-13. The spread on this one, 9.5. They go ahead and cover that. There's just not much to say right now about the Jets, unfortunately. They were not going to cover this game. It was hard to trust the Dolphins to do 10 on the road because of how they've kind of floundered slightly in recent weeks, and they're not that super potent, super poised, incredibly crazy offensive EPA per play type team that they were in the first, month and a half of the season, but they're still very, very good offensively. They get the looks that they want, and they dominate bad teams. It's as simple as that. This game in particular, they let's see. I had the game at looked like it said 30. That can't be right. I must have the wrong number down. It looks like the game total was 40. They go ahead and go over that. I mean, the Dolphins almost cover it by themselves. But obviously, the story is the Jets. The Jets have no offense to speak of. They have a good defense, but a defense that cannot do much when the offense continues to give plus territory turnovers to opposing offenses, puts them in bad situations. Sometimes they miss plays. I know Sauce Gardner had a couple of misses this week, but this is one of those games that is just a tough look for them. And for anybody that wasn't aware, we did pick and break down this game in the Discord. So shameless plug, if you're not in there, go get in there. That's how you ask us all the questions about any of the games or get our picks on any of the games that we might not break down or that go before we go live. So definitely get in there, hit us up. And V, what did you make of this one? I know that on this dreary Black Friday that you were knee deep in Dolphins Jets. What did you make of this one?
Yeah, I was definitely knee deep. I had a fantasy matchup going against Tua and Jalen Waddle, so I was sweating that one. But the two first half picks by Tua really saved me because he didn't end up having a very good fantasy day. But Yeah, this was just a horrific game by the Jets offense once again. If you look at their first half possessions, it was, I don't know, 6 straight punts and then a pick six to end the first half. Just wild stuff. You don't see that in the NFL. Even the Giants at their worst. I don't know if it was quite. It might have been that bad, but I mean, I don't know. It's been tough to watch. I don't really know what they do for the rest of the year. There's no quarterbacks available right now that can fix what their issues are. And they had their opportunities at the trade deadline to make a move. A couple guys were available that would have maybe not turned their season around, but it would have been markedly improved from whatever they're getting right now. So you know, disappointing from their personnel group for not being able to identify that and sticking with Zach Wilson for whatever reason. They're just bizarre stuff over there. I don't know if we're going to see some changes in the offseason because it feels like, when they have their guys, this is a good group. This is still a very good defense that's coached by Saleh. They've made some, obviously great moves to get those players on defense. They drafted Garrett Wilson. So they have obviously some idea of what they're doing, but it seems like the singular decision of drafting Zach Wilson and then playing him this year has really cratered them for the last couple of years. So that one singular decision could cause significant change in that front office going into next year, which is, kind of a shame because again, I do think overall they've done a relatively good job. They should have been competing for not only the division title this year, but a spot in the Super Bowl if they had a healthy Aaron Rodgers. I think that's how good this team could have been. So tough to watch, but yeah, interesting to see what they do in the
Well,
offseason.
and we've seen them in prime time so many times this
Too
year.
many
I
times.
I feel like we've seen them in prime time almost every other week, and it's all off of the premise that these were supposed to be the Aaron Rodgers led Jets, not the Zach
How
Wilson
great
led
would this
Jets.
game have been if Rodgers was there? Rodgers versus Tua. This
It
would
would
have
have
been
been
a
fantastic.
great game.
It would have been absolutely fantastic. And one of the issues does come down to, I believe, I want to say that wasn't there a report that Carson Wentz had gone and knocked on the door over there in New
Something
York,
like that, yeah.
and yeah, and they still were like, hey, you know, I could see it. Hey, that might not be the most reliable backup that you would want, or career veteran that you would want to bring in to quarterback your team. That might not make the hugest difference for you, but it was definitely going to be better than a net negative of Tim Boyle, and Zach Wilson. Some picks that we highlighted in this game: under 14.5 for the Jets. The fact that the Jets can get a team total, if you are shopping Jets totals for the rest of the year and you see anything over 14, go hammer it. Go hammer it. They have been atrocious. They have not scored more than 14 points since week 6. Let that sink in. I understand that it's been a combination of Zach Wilson and the ineptitude of the offensive play calling and just a number of other things, but this is a huge issue for them right now. And the fact that they were okay with wheeling Tim Boyle out there with, I get that Trevor Simeon was on the bench and whatever, but that was atrocious. So
Well,
what
week
we
six
looked
was a
at,
long time ago, bro. That was
week
forever
6 was
ago.
a long time ago. So
Sheesh.
what some of the things that we're going to continue to target as we move forward are these Jets totals, and just the general totals of some of these offensives that have been absolutely stinkers. Not to, have the Giants catch a stray here, but the Tommy DeVito Giants are probably up there too. And another thing that you can kind of mesh together with a lot of these inexperienced quarterbacks that we've seen over the last, what has it been, V2-3 weeks. We've seen a ton of backup quarterbacks, a
Yep.
ton of injuries at the quarterback position. One thing to look at as we move forward is that just because these offenses are going down into their second and third quarterbacks trying to find answers, does not mean they're turning to running the football like a lot of people think would be the go-to when you're struggling and when you have an inexperienced passer. A lot of these guys are actually being forced to throw the ball a ton because NFL coaches don't want to lose no matter who the quarterback is. And when they go down quite a bit, you're going to see some throws. So one of the ones that we targeted here in this game also was Tim Boyle over 29.5 attempts. He barely goes over that, thankfully, at 30. But that's another one of those that you can watch for as these other quarterbacks and inexperienced quarterbacks do. Now, it's a team-to-team thing. It's kind of a philosophy thing because you're not going to see like Dorian Thompson-Robinson probably get 30 attempts in a game. But
Well, you might be surprised about that. We'll get into that a little bit later.
yeah,
That dude is
you're
crushing the
right.
football right now.
Maybe we'll get into that here in a little bit. But anyway, another one of those things that we've talked about significantly with these backup quarterbacks is how they deal with pressure and how they do securing the football and not giving the football away. And unfortunately for Tim Boyle, it was not a good look for him as a career look. He hasn't had a ton of starts, but he's given up the football a ton. And he did. He had about let's see, 3 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, but 1 big time throw, 10 turnover worthy plays. That's 2 starts, 6 appearances. Now he threw those picks in this game, and unfortunately, the value there for him to throw a pick was just obviously atrocious because it was almost to be expected. So sometimes it's nice with ones like that where we get these unexperienced passers that will most likely be giving the ball up to maybe a turnover heavy defense like Miami had. What we see here is sometimes it's better to go in, isolate some of the guys that have been picking off balls. Now, I isolated Jalen Ramsey in this one because he had an extreme value at plus 360. That's excellent. And given how he's played since returning, he's only allowed 4 receptions, 3 interceptions, 3 games played. That's very impressive. He didn't end up getting one, but that's because he absolutely locked down his side. I don't even know that they targeted his way very often. And then additionally, with things like pressure, you can highlight guys that are getting to the quarterback quite a bit and recording sacks. For this one, we highlighted Bradley Chubb, who had been doing fantastically. He was at a pretty modest minus 125. Now, unfortunately, Jalen Ramsey and Bradley Chubb didn't get those, but that kind of shows opportunities that you can sprinkle a few dollars on, get a high payout and get a high opportunity there, because it's not like that didn't happen. Tim Boyle threw a ton of interceptions and got
Yep.
sacked all day, but it just didn't happen to be the 2 guys we highlighted. So those are opportunities that we can move into, as we ID more and more things and more problem quarterbacks. So those are kind of where I ID value in those type of games, though. But wow. And that that does it for the recap, V. Any other parting notes on that one or any of the other games from the holiday?
I think it's just crazy. There was a defensive touchdown in all 4 of these standalone holiday games. Pretty wild stuff. I think every game went over except for maybe the game last night pushed, depending on where you got it at 44. So lots
Yeah.
of one-sided games, but lots of points. So somewhat entertaining, but not very close games in the end.
Yeah, not very close games in the end and some surprisers. So that's how you know this next week is going to be just chock full of some fun things.
Oh
So
yeah.
the first game that we have on the slate here, V, is we're IDing the Jacksonville Jaguars heading into Houston to take on the Texans. The Texans, home dogs, plus 1.5. Total on this game, 47.5 points. We're both liking Houston in this one at plus 1.5. I'm sure that we're probably going to be looking as it moves and as it gets closer to kickoff at the money line here, because like we always talk about, when it gets under that 3, these are money line opportunities. I'm seeing it at plus 105. It says right here at DraftKings. That might be something we have to shop. I don't know that plus 105 is I would like maybe a little bit more. I would probably like
Yeah.
it closer to plus 115, plus 120, but beggars can't be choosers. I like it here. There's a few obvious reasons. And one of the big surprising things for this week, not necessarily this game specifically, is 7 of the 12 remaining games from the slate this week have road favorites. And actually, the first one is we're going against the road favorite. So I get it. Jacksonville, they had a bounce back. They won, covered last week versus Tennessee. They are also 2-0 as road favorites this year. We've talked about it. They are a very good against the spread team, even though they haven't quite, been as potent in some recent weeks with what they've been able to push out. But they're still a very good team. For me, the biggest thing here is the matchup. Houston's offense, Jacksonville defense, which have actually been going in polar opposite directions. Houston, 30 points per game in the last 3. That's 5th in the NFL, while the Jags have the worst EPA per play allowed over the last 3. They are last in the NFL in coverage EPA per play, which is a huge reason why they're struggling. And part of that is because they have been missing Tyson Campbell for a while now. It wasn't something that we had put so much weight into in previous weeks, especially just a couple of weeks ago. He was coming back and then had another injury. The hamstring, always difficult to deal with, but that leaves this secondary shorthanded. And while their pass rush has been productive, the back end struggles have led to some issues for them. And this could be another one of those situations for me, which is another reason that we talked about actually in our Discord about some guys that we're IDing. And our guy Wise from the Discord had actually brought up who are we liking out of one of his picks for fantasy, which shout out to Wise for coming over to the betting guys for the fantasy picks. Love you, buddy. That's exactly what we like to see. But I mean, the betting, the fantasy guys, Jason and the fantasy guys all over there, they had the right idea too. They're IDing Nico Collins, and that actually opened up my eyes a little bit to how undervalued Nico Collins is right now on the props market, and it makes no sense. Nico is an excellent talent. He was the wide receiver 1 on this team, but in recent weeks, the connection between Dell and Shroud has obviously taken over the narrative, and for good reason. Dell has been amazing. Shroud and Dell have shown a connection that is just almost unmatched. They've looked great. But given the injury to Tyson Campbell, Nico Collins' great ability, and the attention that the Jags will most likely pay to Dell, I think this could lead to some plus matchups for Collins. That's why I like Nico Collins at over 59.5 receiving yards here as well. You could also play around with his touchdown prop if you like, because one of the reasons why this is a good opportunity for him is his size, his ability to win balls down the field, where a lot of people don't realize this, but CJ Stroud has been pushing the ball down the field. He's like second in A dot. He is, last time I checked, he was first in passes beyond the sticks, which is huge for a young guy like that to be pushing the ball and reading the field the way that he has. I think this is a great opportunity for the Texans and just the Texans as a whole. I like watching the Texans. The Texans have made me a fan. They are so scrappy, and it's so fun to watch them play, even sometimes when they don't quite cover spreads like we think, like last week, just barely missing out against Arizona. I think that they're on the right path. I think they have the stuff, and I don't know. I get why they leaned at plus 1.5 here at home, but if I were setting the line, it wouldn't have been that. What are you making of this one, V?
Yep, I'm right there with you all over Houston plus 1.5. When you're getting a team as good as Houston at home as an underdog, it's kind of just too hard to pass up. We can start with Jacksonville first, though. Like you said, they had a kind of a bounce back game last week. It was kind of their first clean offensive game in quite a while where they had 0 turnovers. Prior to that, they had a pretty long stretch of turning the ball over at least 2 times for multiple times in that stretch. So it was just they were not playing very efficiently during that period. But last week they kind of turned things around. Uh, Trevor Lawrence had 4 total touchdowns. I think prior to that he only had 9 passing touchdowns coming to the game. He had 2 last week plus 2 rushing. So it kind of looks like they got back to form and they look like who they should have been. But the question is how much of that was them turning a corner versus them playing a Tennessee Titans team that is just not a good football team right now. So I think that's the concern going forward for them was can they do it against better competition, which is what we're going to find out this week. As far as Houston, you already mentioned it. Their last 3 games, they've been incredible, averaging 30 points per game. CJ Stroud in those 3 games has thrown for 1,162 passing yards and 8 touchdowns. Just an unbelievable stretch for the rookie. On top of that, though, their defense has also been playing well in that stretch. In those 3 games, they have 5 takeaways and 9 sacks. So I think right now this is a team that is not only playing well offensively, but their defense is starting to round out, especially with the return of Derek Stingley from his long absence due to injury. So I just think right now this Houston team is a more of a complete team. So when you have what I think is a better team at home getting points, really tough to pass up on that one. So I'm right there with you on Houston plus 1.5.
Houston can win this division. Let that sink in.
If they win this game, they're in first for that division because they would have the same record as Jacksonville, but they beat them twice if they win on Sunday. So they would be in pole position to win this division for sure.
And nobody thinks it. And that's
Nobody would have
why
thought that. Their total
nobody
at
would have
this,
thought that.
yeah, the total at the beginning of the season was 6.5. I think a lot of us were probably on the under. So
Yeah,
going from that to winning the division, huge price for them. And they don't have their first round pick next year, so there's no reason for them not to go out and try to win every game possible this year.
absolutely. And coaching has been huge for them. They've been
Coaching matters,
fantastic.
people.
Yeah, coaching matters. And you know what else? You know what else? We talk about this a lot. Every single week, I write the top 15 graded rookies for PFF over at pff.com. Go check it out. Shameless plug. And you want to know who week in and week out has up there among the most rookies in the top 15? It's the Houston Texans. Will Anderson, CJ Stroud, Tank Dell, they are getting huge contributions from this first year class, and they are excelling because of it. The future is so bright for this team, and it's
Yeah,
going to
and now they're
continue
getting
to
their
get brighter.
second round center, Juice Scruggs, back, who has missed quite a bit of time to help bolster that offensive line. So if he comes in and he also plays well, this is going to be one of the best draft classes we've seen in a very long time.
Absolutely. Absolutely couldn't agree more. And this is going to be a fun one to watch too, because we're not out on the Jags. Like let us also be clear. We like the Jags. The Jags have pieces. The Jags just have issues that they need to figure out in terms of their offensive productivity, which they took some steps towards this last week, and figuring out some of their holes on defense that are kind of crippling them into mediocrity, where they could be much better given some of the pieces that they do have. So let that be clear. But this is going to be an excellent game. Can't wait to watch it.
Yep.
The next game on the list, I can't say the same thing about, unfortunately. We have the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into Cincinnati. And unfortunately, as many of you know, the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be without Joe Burrow. Joe Cool out, torn wrist ligament, I think it was, right? Can't grip the
Yep.
ball. So that's unfortunate. Let's, hope he has a nice speedy recovery. Everybody likes watching Joe Burrow play football. But they are going to be starting Jake Browning, which leads them to this game right here. Pittsburgh is 1.5-point road favorites in this one. Game total 35.5 points. I know you're liking Pittsburgh in this one at -1.5. What are you seeing in them that you're targeting for this?
Well, they finally made the move that I think the whole country was waiting for. They fired Matt Canada. It was about time. I don't know if we've seen. I mean, we just talked about the Jets. We talked about the Giants. Pittsburgh's offense is right up there with them in terms of just being so inept at pretty much every facet of offensive football. It was incredibly difficult to watch, especially given I don't know. I feel like again we're repeating ourselves. Given how good their defense is also playing, it's really tough to see how poorly their offense is doing and kind of just dragging them down. Honestly, there's just really nowhere to go but up for them with this move. Hopefully, we can get some production out of them because they have pieces on offense, namely Jalen Warren, who has clearly been their best player over the recent weeks. He should be a featured player in this offense. No more time split with Najee Harris. Jalen Warren is significantly better. They should run the offense through him. And then you can get complementary play from George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Najee, and all these other guys. So hopefully they can funnel everything through Jalen and not rely too much on Kenny Pickett because he's struggling right now. So nowhere to go but up for them. So definitely hoping to see better things from them. But obviously the main reason we're taking Pittsburgh here is because, like you said, Jake Browning is starting for Cincinnati. I made a joke a couple of weeks ago that I don't want to see a playoffs without Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, and Justin Herbert. Unfortunately, we're getting very close to that becoming a reality given these injuries and the poor play from the Chargers. Yeah, Jake Browning, I don't know. He just doesn't seem like he's going to have much success in this game. This is his first career start, and he has to go up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their defense has been great the last month and a half. Over their last 6 games, they have allowed 20 or fewer points. That includes games against Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence, and Matthew Stafford. I don't want to make any sort of long-term judgment on Jake Browning, but he is not in the same category as those guys. So if those guys couldn't score 20 points or more than 20 points on this Pittsburgh defense, I don't see how Jake Browning is going to be able to do that. This Pittsburgh defense is tied for third in takeaways, and they rank in the top 10 in pressure percentage. They're going to be without T. Higgins on offense, so just one fewer weapon for Jake Browning to play with. And then defensively, Cincinnati's going to be without Cameron Taylor-Bright, who's been one of the breakout players in the league this year. I think he's Cincinnati's best player in that secondary, just making big plays week in and week out. Going to be a big loss for them. So, as much as we need to see Pittsburgh prove what they can do offensively, I think their defense is more than good enough to win this game single-handedly against Jake Browning.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to head back to Pittsburgh for a second, one thing I think that doesn't get talked about enough, at least in the moment, is lingering injuries that don't make it to the injury report.
Mm-hmm.
And this game specifically highlights that issue, given what we've seen with the Bengals last week. No Joe Burrow on the injury report, gets off the plane in a wrist wrap. There's all
Yep.
these talks about what's the issue here. That was all the buzz before the game. And then he tears his wrist. Okay. We
Yep.
turn around in the same thing. We can say, or maybe not the same thing, but a similar instance when we talk about a handful of weeks ago when Mike Tomlin is talking about what they're going to do at quarterback and who's going to start. And they're saying, well, we just have to see how tough Kenny Pickett is. That's classic Mike Tomlin kind of BS coach speak about, playing through injuries and things. Well, if we go back and look at like a guy like, or if we go back and look at a guy like Baker Mayfield, where he played through a, busted shoulder and played his ass off and really didn't play that well. And then what happened? He kind of got shipped off. And that's something I think we need to read in between the lines on some of these games when we break down value. I think we could maybe consider that Kenny Pickett, especially given how horrendous the offense has been in recent weeks over even just a few weeks in the middle of the season, they were playing a little bit better offensively. They were kind of starting to figure it out against some lower level defenses, and that was a step forward. That just never panned out for them, and they have been absolutely atrocious. We talked about the firing of Matt Canada. And obviously why I think a lot of people in the NFL that don't know the name of coordinators or in NFL fandom that don't know the name of coordinators and front office people knew who Matt Canada was. That's all I'll have to say about that situation because of how bad that offense was. 28th in points per game. And that's honestly one of the big reasons why I'm leaning on the under in this one at 35.5. 35.5 is not a big number. We talk about it a lot. But frankly, for either of these teams, given the situation, 35 is more than doable to go under. And Pittsburgh is hitting under 80% of their games. You talked about it. It's part of their offensive ineptitude up to this point in their combination of just defensive prowess. I still like where your head's at with them covering at 1.5 because frankly, right now, we talked about this Cincy team all year in a kind of a realm of, okay, they were really poor to start off with. Maybe that was Joe Burrow's calf. Yeah, Joe Burrow's feeling better. They're looking better as a team. I think you can only expect a similar outcome now. I think the kind of momentum for the Bengals has gone out of the building. There's no wind in those sails anymore. They're going to have a tough time moving forward. Actually, just like you said, losing their best secondary player in Britt. This is going to be a tough look for them with Jake Browning. I was actually super duper confused. I had a Mandela effect moment where I was sure that he had a stint where he started 2 or 3 games, and I went looking for maybe 20 minutes for it and could not find it. I thought my computer wasn't running right or something. So, but you're absolutely right, making his first start. And that's a tough look considering that that all of the points that they scored last week were more or less in garbage time with Browning. That game was not in hand. and Baltimore had essentially warmed up the bus by halftime for that. So to expect them to score another 20, even though Baltimore is a fantastic defense, they obviously mailed it in at the end. I don't see that being an issue this week. I see them probably hitting like 10, 13 points, if
Yeah.
that. And I think you're going to be looking at like a 14 to 16 point win or a 14 to 16 points by Pittsburgh, covering this game, going under, and it's going to be pretty easy. And you won't even have to watch any of it to make money. Isn't that the cool
Nope.
part?
Just ignore it. Watch Jacksonville, Houston, and just print money afterwards.
Yeah, there you go. The next game we have on the list, though, actually could be a nice little matchup. It might
Yeah.
not be the most high billing matchup, but it'll be an interesting one. We have Tampa Bay heading into Indy to take on the Colts. Tampa is 2.5-point road dogs here. So under the clean 3 for Indy. Game total for this one, 44.5. V, I know you're liking some picks in this one. What are you targeting here?
Yeah, I like the over at 44.5. I think these are two defenses that are not playing particularly well right now, so should be quite a few points in this one. We can start with Tampa Bay's defense. They have been struggling mightily recently. They have allowed 24 or more points in 3 of their last 4. They were allowing the second most passing yards per game this year at 271. Gardner Minshew, while not the best quarterback we've ever seen, he is certainly more than capable of airing the ball out and pushing the ball down the field with some of the weapons they have. So I think this should be a big game for the Colts and their passing game. Tampa Bay does rank in the top 10 in rushing yards allowed, thanks to the play of Vita Vea in the middle and now rookie Kalijah Cansey. So I think it could be a long day for Jonathan Taylor, but I do think it should be a nice day for Minshew and the wide receivers in this game. On the flip side, the Colts defense struggles when they play against average to above average quarterbacks, but they're really good when they play bad quarterbacks. In 3 consecutive games in the middle of the year this year, when they played Trevor Lawrence, PJ Walker, and Derek Carr, they gave up 37 points, 39 points, and then 38 points. And then their next 2 games, they played Bryce Young and Mac Jones, and they allowed 13 points and 6 points. So there's a pretty clear divide for this Indy team based on the quarterback they're going up against. This week, they're going up against Baker Mayfield, who, again, might not be the best quarterback we've ever seen, but he is certainly better than Bryce Young or Mac Jones. So I do think both teams are going to be able to move the ball through the air and put up points. Each team should easily score 20-plus points in this game, so definitely like the over. A couple injury notes for Tampa Bay. Levante David and Jamel Dean are out, so makes it even easier for this Indy offense. I think lots of points in this one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And especially when you see that Baker is finding Evans at a pretty nice clip. He's
Yep.
finding some of his guys. He's pushing the ball down the field. He's unafraid and he sticks in there. Dude is tough. Honestly, the dude is really, really tough. He deserves his spot in the NFL with how he's played and how he's gone. And you know what else I just like to think of? It makes me laugh when I think of like Gardner Minshew. I feel like Gardner Minshew is the full on reincarnation of Brett Favre, all the
Yeah.
way down to the interceptions and the mullet and whatnot, like, and just the Mississippi kind of the drawl type of guy. I feel like if more advanced analytics were around Bracken Favre's day, he would probably be looked at in a similar light as Minshew, as a gamer, gunslinger type dude. But when he gives up the ball, he ends up being an issue. But has that ability to just put up points in bunches. They've shown it at a ton of times this season.
Yep.
We thought they were going to kind of hit a skid when Anthony Richardson just kept getting injured and they couldn't really find that footing offensively. They still give up the ball, but they still throw for touchdowns. They're still doing their thing. Jonathan Taylor, he's playing decently well. He might not, be the bell cow back that everybody had hoped kind of when he would have come back, but he's still playing decently well. That's all we can hope for on that one. And the defenses, man, I don't know. The defenses
And
at
Carlton
times are
Davis
very.
the last few weeks, oh my goodness, that boy is getting torched up and down the field for Tampa Bay.
It looks like a couple of years ago where he was one of the like lesser corners in the league. I don't want to say one of the worst because he's always been kind of a high risk, high reward type guy, given his size and ability to kind of play passing lanes at the target point. But it doesn't matter if you can do that when you're giving up the separation that he has. And that's really coming to light right now. He's absolutely getting torched. So that should be one that everybody watches for sure, especially with a guy like Josh Downs, who can really make people miss in the open field. So that's going to be an interesting matchup potentially in this
Good
group.
tease by you. Maybe might see a prop from him for me this week in our Discord.
Maybe. That's a good one. See, me and VR, we didn't even plan that, by the way. We're just on the same link. I think we've just been working together long enough that we're like, we can read each other's thoughts well before.
For sure.
So another one we have here, and I'm not going to lie, I didn't pick it myself. And I shouldn't say I didn't pick it myself. I didn't add it to my slate of picks in our show today because I wanted to hit some other games also, and we could talk about more and more games, which is always fun. But I'm right here with you on this one, so I'll let you break into it here. We have the Cleveland Browns heading into Denver to take on the Broncos. And before you head into it, V, I just have a couple of weather notes. I
Ooh,
am the weatherman of the betting
yes.
world. There's a couple of weather notes while the weather on its own looks to be very mild on Sunday at about 38 degrees. It's a high of about 41. It's snowing as we speak here in Denver. It snowed
Jeez.
yesterday. It's been frigid today. It's been very, very cold, and we are expected to have snow tomorrow as well. Now, for anybody who is not super versed in what that means in terms of meteorology or snow or just mountain men culture, when it gets cold and then snows, that's when it's bad because it just kind of starts to pile up and then it doesn't thaw very well. And so what's going to happen is they're not going to have a ton of snow, but that ground is going to be hard and it's going to be pretty cold. It's going to feel colder than 38 degrees, especially up here at Mile High. So that's my only note for that specifically, which will tie into one of your picks for this, obviously. But V, without further ado, what are you IDing in this one as your value plays?
Love the on the ground reporting from Mason there. Great
Of
stuff. But
course.
yes, I'm on the Broncos -1.5 and on the under 36 in this game. Man, your Denver Broncos have been on absolute fire recently. They've won 4 in a row, and their offense just looks really efficient during that stretch. Only 2 turnovers in that period. Whereas on defense, they have taken the ball away 13 times in the last 4 games, allowing 22 or fewer points in each of those games. Incredible turnaround for this defense that not long ago we were talking about them giving up 70 points in a single football game. Shout out to that coaching staff and those players for turning things around. Very, very impressive. Now they get to face Dorian Thompson Robinson, which must feel like a cakewalk after going up against Josh Allen and Josh Dobbs the last couple of weeks. This is going to be Dorian Thompson Robinson's third start of the season. In his first 2 games, he scored a combined 16 points in those games. But the most astonishing thing that I found out while researching this game, you talked about earlier how you didn't think DTR would maybe hit that 30 passing attempts in a single game. In his 2 starts this year, he has an astonishing 79 pass attempts. He is averaging almost 40 pass attempts per game, and yet he has only thrown for a combined 286 passing yards. That is 3.6 yards per attempt. That is almost 2 yards lower than Bryce Young, who ranks 34th in the NFL in yards per attempt at 5.4. This is not a good offense
Yikes.
in Cleveland when DTR is starting for them. It's going to be a struggle for them to move the ball. I know they won the game last week, but man, they scored 13 points. Does not mean a lot. It's not going to be anything that translates for them down the road. This should be a relatively easy win for the Denver Broncos. And I think it should be a relatively easy under because we're still playing this Cleveland defense that is fantastic. In 2 of their last 3 games, they have allowed 10 or fewer points. I think this should be a very, very low scoring game. Easy win for the Broncos, easy under for me. And then just quick injury note: Denzel Ward is out for the Cleveland Browns in this game. Their top corner. I think this shouldn't be much of a sweat in either direction in this game.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense, especially when you look at this is a trend that we've been following over the last couple of weeks. In terms of, I think, kind of the first time we really did um notice that the defensive shift in mentality and philosophy and how well they've been playing, just a pure efficiency, was kind of when we talked about that under in Kansas City, because we got to that point where we were like, well, over is always hitting for these Broncos games at the beginning of the season. And we're obviously famous for our KC unders. And when they met up that first time a few weeks back, that was the very first time we were like, hey, look at what's happening over here. There's senses, there seems
Yeah,
to be a
Justin
shift.
Simmons came back. They kind of got a little bit healthier. Then they know they've just been playing great ever since.
Exactly, exactly. Now they've been playing great ever since, under in their last 5. So, that tells you everything that you need to know, and as much as we talk about 36.5 being a low number, it's not even the lowest number on this ticket here, and there's more than enough reason to, considering what Cleveland's putting out with. And honestly, I think as a football media as a whole, we kind of need to talk about nicknaming people before they I get that DTR is kind of a convenience nickname, considering nobody wants to name out the whole, Dorian Thompson Robinson is like 11 syllables. But I think at this point we need to just start calling him Thompson Robinson or something, because nicknames need to go to guys who are actually doing things on the field, and unfortunately that
It
has
seems
not
like
been
it
the case
carried
for him.
over from his college days, where I think he was a very exciting player at
Yeah,
UCLA. That's what people called him. So just a bit of a
yeah.
carryover from there. So
Can we reject nicknames? What is the threshold for nickname rejection? I guess that's got to be the question. But I'm
you
right
got
there
to
with you.
average at least 5 yards per attempt. Maybe can we set it there?
Yeah, exactly. That is insane, though.
I
I
was shocked
honestly
when I saw that. I was like you said
no
earlier, you
idea.
thought your computer was messing up. I thought my computer was broken. I had to double check
Yeah,
my stuff.
got to go check the Wi-Fi. Got to go unplug it, make sure it's all working.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next game we have on the list here, the Rams head into Arizona to take on Kyler Murray's Cardinals, and the Cardinals are 2.5-point road dogs. I will be honest, this is a game I'm really, really watching closely because I love it at 3, but I'll live with 2.5. So I'm going to wait until I can really see where it's going to go. Hopefully, I can get closer to that 3 that I want here, but I'm siding with the Cardinals at plus 2.5. And really, it's kind of a bet more against whatever the Rams are doing right now. It's hard to know what to make of them. They're 2-7 against the spread since the start of October. They're 0-4 in their last 4 against the spread. And now they're going to deal with some injury issues. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua were both on the injury report this week. They're projected to be able to go, but that is going to be a huge question for them. Kupp specifically, who has kind of been in and out of the lineup since returning, seems like he has one injury here, one injury there, misses time here, misses time there. So even if he's in the game or starting the game, it's tough to really mark that he's going to be finishing the game. And then Nakua, he just now kind of started having those bumps and bruises. And when you think about a young player like Nakua, he is heading into the max football he's ever played in a single season. And that's not to be like, oh, hey, that's just him. That's a general thing for rookies, because guys don't play 15 game seasons all the time, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 game seasons like in the NFL in college. So this is kind of getting to the point where a lot of rookies might start to teeter off a little bit, might start to get the business end of some of those hits and those bumps and bruises. That's kind of where it looks like it's gone with Nakua. But on the positive side for the Rams, they are projected to get Kyron Williams back. Now, this is another reason why I'm watching this game. Kyron Williams, obviously the running back one there. He's been out for a bit. Ankle, maybe a hamstring. I want to say it was an ankle. Saturday, though, is the important date for this. Tomorrow is the official deadline for them to clear him for play for the week. So that's going to be something worth watching, and that might warrant some line movement. Now, I expect Kyron Williams to play, but I'm also hoping that that news of him officially being active moves this line closer to 3 and into a better position for us. One of the reasons I also like this is since Arizona got Kyler Murray back, as we talked about, they got their best player back. They're now 2-0 against the spread. Obviously, they had a bit of a, I don't know if you can call it a backdoor cover because they didn't score in the fourth quarter, but a bit of a backdoor cover, a close cover last week. And Kyler Murray is a big reason why. On the surface, it looks like he's only playing pretty middlingly since he's 1 touchdown passing to 2 interception ratio. But he holds a 3-to-1 big time throw to turnover worthy play ratio, which, as we've talked about, takes into account your ability to push the ball down the field with big time throws, as opposed to guys kind of taking the work for you. Short throws, they take it the distance. And in same turnover worthy plays kind of takes into account, if a guy drops the ball and it's tipped up in the air and it's intercepted and things like that, which has been an issue with what happened with Kyler. So the other thing that I really love about this matchup, though, in particular, is that they are that Kyler is rushing the ball as well as he has. He looks like he's obviously feeling fine. He's moving. He's taking advantage of defenses that are sleeping on him. I really like his rushing line in this game. Now, 36.5 is a good chunk for rushing for a quarterback, but I think it's very manageable as he went over that last week and he came 3 yards away from going over it in his first, and he has 2 rushing touchdowns in each of the last 2. You can get his rushing anytime touchdown odds at plus 200.
Ooh,
Now,
very nice.
he might not make it in, but when you can tag along over 36.5 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown at plus 205, it's definitely worth a sprinkle, especially when you think about kind of the Rams' bread and butter in terms of defense. Aaron Donald's going to be chasing the dude around quite a bit. You'd think he's going to take off quite a few times. So I really like that. And I think that they have enough offensively in the big playability that they were lacking a ton of early on in the season, which made them struggle, has now kind of come back. They're putting more points on the board and they're looking like an actual cohesive offense. I like Arizona here as the road dog plus 2.5. But like I said, I'm shopping for 3 here. V, anything that you're seeing in this game that I might have missed?
Well, this one is a very bizarre one for me. I've been all over the Cardinals the last couple of weeks since Kyler came back. I took them as a home underdog against the Falcons. 2 weeks ago, I took them at plus 5.5 last week against Houston, which they also covered just barely, but they covered. And I was ready to take them this week. I believe the line opened up at the Rams -1. Then it pretty quickly moved to the Cardinals -1. But in the back half of this week, it bizarrely moved to the Rams -2.5. And I was very confused what was causing this line movement. It seems maybe from the outset that it was caused by the news of Cooper Cup being available in this game. But I was surprised to see that the line would have moved so much just with Cooper Cup playing in this game. He's a fantastic receiver, obviously, but him being worth 3.5 points to the spread seemed quite a lot. So it's just been very confusing to me for this line movement. So I've kind of stayed away just because I feel like there might be some information that we don't know, which is causing this big shift. But just on the surface of it on paper, I absolutely love the Cardinals in this game, just like you do. I still might take them. I would have taken them at -1, so I'll definitely take them at plus 2.5 if there's nothing crazy that comes out. This Cardinals team, I just think, is better with Kyler Murray out there. They're so explosive offensively. He can throw the ball down the field. His rushing ability is obviously very prevalent. What I think is missing that from the discussion around this Cardinals team, though, is how well their defense is playing right now. They're getting after the quarterback and they are taking the ball away. They picked off CJ Stroud 3 times last week. 2 of them were in the red zone. Stroud has not thrown red zone interceptions this year until last week. He might have had one or two, but having two in one game, both in the second half, this is a defense that is playing very well. They don't have a lot of household names. I can't even name a lot of those guys who are playing out there, but they're playing very hard. They're playing very well. Kudos to Jonathan Gannon for coming in there and kind of turning that culture around a little bit, especially on the defensive side. This is a Cardinals team that's going to rush the passer and take the ball away, you have to take them to beat this Rams team that right now is not really doing a whole lot well on either side of the ball. Yes, they won last week, but they only scored 17 points. This is an offense that has a lot of weapons out there, but they are just not putting the ball into the end zone at a reliable clip. So until they start doing that, you kind of got to fade them. I don't think this is a team that's going to do a whole lot in the back stretch of the season. So I'm right there with you on the Cardinals. Very confused by this line movement though throughout the week.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It did. It took a crazy dive. And I think you're right. I think it was a combination of Cup and like the release of who was it? Darrell
Henderson. Yeah.
Henderson. Yeah, Darrell Henderson. And that kind of indicating like, hey, Kyron's probably coming back this week. I think that was the big indicator for them. But I think for all the reasons that you said and that I said, I completely agree too. And just some trends that we're looking at. The Cardinals are 4-1 against the spread as road or as home dogs this year. So let that sink in. And over their last 4, they have covered 3. Now, only 2 of those games actually came with Kyler Murray, which were the last 2, and he covered the last 2. But even to cover 3 of the last 4 is a credit to exactly what you said with defense and how well they've played in terms of defensively. Now, that can kind of be a wishy-washy because, they went into Cleveland a few weeks ago and kind of didn't do anything and got 27-0. But everything that we saw last week, the week prior. Now, to be fair, I did look at this game in their last home dog game and looked at Atlanta in the Rams. And I sit there and I go, in a nutshell, I wouldn't consider this an even matchup as that one was, whereas Atlanta is 2-point favorites on the road. I could see it more here with the Rams, so I kind of wanted more points, which is why I'm leaning towards the 3. But exactly like you said, I'm still comfortable taking this game at a pick'em or even at the -1 like we were shopping around earlier in the week with Arizona. And it's because these teams are kind of heading in different directions in terms of what they've been putting on the field. So I'm excited to see this one. I think Kyler is going to have some stuff up his sleeve, so I'm excited to see it. But yes, this is going to be a good one for sure.
Yep.
In the last game we have on the list, I know there's another huge matchup out there. And so if you want more picks for that matchup specifically, I'm not even going to tease it right here in the show. But if you want picks for that matchup, head into our Discord and ask us about it, and we will definitely break down that game of the week here. But for our last game, we're looking at Baltimore heading into LA to take on the Chargers. And it's another road favorite. -3 for the Ravens. And I'm liking the Ravens. And it's because they've been effectively the best team in the AFC over the last month. And it's not really hard to see why they might be up there with the best team in the NFL over the last month. Top 3 in about every offensive and defensive metric out there. Points per game, EPA per play, all those type of things. And really, it's just that this is a spotty matchup at best for the Chargers. They have only covered 2 of their last 6. And one of the things we talk about specifically is the kind of tier of matchup, the level of opponent you come up against, and how those games that you cover should be treated differently than other games that you potentially cover. Well, if you look at it this way, the only covers that they've had over those last 6 were against the Jets and the Bears. The other games that they failed to cover came against Dallas, KC, Detroit, and Green Bay. Teams that we've all talked about today.
I wonder what the
So
difference is between those teams and the Bears and the Jets.
I wonder, right? So when you look at that, I would say that this obviously categorizes as one of those ladder matchups. And just to add more salt to this wound, the Chargers are 0-3 as dogs this year. That is the worst in the NFL, and they are at home now as a 3-point dog. That's a tough look, and this is a tough situation for this team whose coach finds themselves on the hot spot. This is a big week for them, and it could mean a lot to what this team does moving forward from a coaching standpoint. And to add more matters worse, Joey Bosa dealing with an injury, just lost your best pass rusher. This is going to be a tough matchup for them, especially if you can't force Lamar to move around a little bit and force him out of his comfort zone. This will end up being a long day for them. I don't see this game actually even being very close for the 3 to matter. I'd say that this is going to be an easy 10-point cover for the Ravens. And unfortunately, it's going to be a tough watch on Monday night. But hopefully, there's some big plays and some fun and excitement there that will make it all worth watching. But yes, this is a very, very lopsided matchup for the Chargers, who are not headed in a good direction right now. And to be 4-6, I'd like to say that this is a shock, but for some reason, the Chargers always seem to underperform given their roster. And this year was no different. They had a great roster and it just didn't pan out for them, and they continue to struggle. Let me see here real quick. Haven't covered either of the last two. They are 2 covers. They've gone 2-4 covering over the last 6. That's just a tough look. So anything you're seeing from this one, V?
A little shocked that this moved from 3.5 to 3. You would think that given, like you said, the
To
go
be
ahead.
fair, to be fair, it is 3.5 almost everywhere. I
Okay,
got it at 3 at
there you go.
FanDuel. So that's a great point, V. And that brings up our number one point that we always make: shopping around to get that value that you like. But you are correct. 3.5 is the line pretty much anywhere. But then again, if you guys are shopping this on Sunday at home, 3.5, I think, is more than reasonable too. Sorry to interrupt, V.
No,
Please.
you're totally right. If you can get it at 3 and you like the Ravens, take it, smash it because that makes a ton. That's just great value there. But like you said, even at 3.5, it may just makes a ton of sense. It's just tough with this Chargers team. I mean, a lot of the years in the past, you can point to them. They've just had terrible injuries, just super unlucky. What can you do? They've had some injuries this year, but it's not been as detrimental as it has been the past few years. Their defense is still relatively healthy. They have all their guys in their secondary, but they just can't stop anybody. I mean, I don't really understand how you allow Jordan Love to torch you like that when you have guys like Derwin James, Asante Samuel, all these guys that you spent high draft capital on, and you just couldn't do anything to stop them whatsoever. You have Keenan Allen dropping multiple passes in the red zone. You have Donald Parham dropping the easiest fourth down conversion of his life. Austin Eckler fumbling in the red zone. Quentin Johnston looking like a huge bust after just 10 or 11 games, dropping that pass that would have got them into field goal range, might have even been a touchdown at the end of the game last week. It's a disaster all around. I don't know if there's a quarterback I feel worse for in the league than Justin Herbert right now, because he is doing everything he can. I think he has not been perfect. He had that Monday night game against the Cowboys where he missed a couple throws that he absolutely should have hit, and that kind of cost him that game. But for the most part, 9 out of 10 times, he is the guy. He puts the ball where he needs to. He makes the right decisions. And I don't know what it is, but the teammates just keep letting him down. The defense lets them down. It's just a tough spot to be in. And it's more disappointing given how good Brandon Staley was as a defensive coordinator in this league prior to becoming the head coach, and now just seeing his defense fall apart as it has. It doesn't really make a ton of sense. It's hard to watch. It's just disappointing feeling for these Chargers fans and these Chargers players, because this is a team that 100% should be competing not only for a playoff spot, but to make noise in the playoffs, but they can't even get there. So very disappointing to see for them.
Yeah, and our guy Jason Draven obviously sick watching what's happening with the Chargers, especially that drop. I think he's still talking about it. He actually posted a great little piece today in our Discord talking about there are 14 teams with a point differential over 0. So a positive point differential, which should equal a positive record. There is just one team that has a under 500 record with a positive point differential. That's the Chargers.
Yep.
So it's a tough look for them. They play some close games. Other games, they miss a lot of stuff. And I guess, granted, they play close games against other opponents. I think Baltimore is in a level above what they
Yeah.
can handle right now, which is why the 3 shouldn't scare anybody off. As some people in some lines you will hear is that the Chargers live off these 3-point home dog games, and this isn't one of those games though. So
Nope,
frankly,
nope. Baltimore
um,
pass rush should have a nice day.
yeah,
I don't see the Chargers defense being able to slow down Lamar at all. I don't think it's going to be a very close game for them either.
it's going to be a tough look for sure. So that does it for us though. That's us breaking down week 12. Are we in week
Yep,
12
week
now?
12. Yep.
It just flies by. We still got a month of football plus even. So it's going to be a wild ride. Can't wait to keep breaking it down with you, buddy. We are back same time next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, Friday. Be there or be square. Also, check us out, importantnonsense.com. You can check out all the teams work there. That's also how you become a member to get into our Discord. I want to say that's the MVP level. That's how you get into our Discord. You can ask us all the questions you want. Any of your betting questions, let us break down any of the games you're looking at for this week. And also any of the fantasy guys, let them get your team right for your playoff push here coming up. You know, everybody's got those games going on. So it's a good one. And of course, be in our Discord for all of our picks. We get even more picks in the Discord every single week. We only break down a fraction of them here, and you're going to see more money line, more player props, teasers, all sorts of things over in there. VRD teased one that he's going to be dropping this week. I might have a couple more in the chamber for you guys. And of course, if you guys want to support us, you can get your IN merch over at importantnonsense.com. Promo code LOCK definitely helps us out. We really appreciate you. Mwah, mwah. And of course, I think that about does it for us. V, do you have any parting words for the folks at home?
I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving and they enjoyed the rest of their holiday weekend. We're coming down to the final stretch here, but it should be a good one. And then we'll still be here for the playoffs. So everybody hop on board. It should be a fun ride towards the rest of the end of the season.
Of course. And speaking of the holiday, thankful for you, buddy. Thankful for IN. Thankful for all the games, the football, the NFL, and all the degenerate betting we're allowed to do. And for everybody that rides with us, we really appreciate you guys. And until next time, good night and good luck.